Okay, so we are recording now. Um, I have the pleasure of introducing Greg Bem, who is going to, he's a faculty librarian at Spokane Community College, and he's going to talk to us today about the role of the college librarian in the Gen AI world.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to my presentation. Because we are getting started a few minutes late, I'm going to go a little bit quicker than I was intending, but just a couple notes. We'll see how it goes with the number of people in here, but there are some Mentimeter activities. You're welcome to participate. You can even load up Mentimeter on your phone if you want to use the QR code. And when we get to the activities, there will be the QR code and the uh, numeric code to get into Mentimeter as well. So let's get started. I'll begin with a land acknowledgement pulled from my college's website and the land acknowledgement we use in the spaces and on the lands here in Spokane. We are honored to acknowledge that the community colleges of Spokane and our main campuses for Spokane Falls and Spokane Community College are located on the traditional and sacred homelands of the Spokane tribe. We also provide services in a region that includes the traditional and sacred homelands of the Coeur d'Alene tribe, the Confederated tribes of the Colville Reservation, the Kalispel tribe, and the Nez Perce tribe. We pay our respect to tribal elders, both past and present, as well as to all Indigenous people today. This land holds their cultural DNA, and we're honored and grateful to be here on their traditional lands, which are also their current lands. We give thanks to the legacy of the original people and their descendants and pledge to honor their stewardship and values. I do have the chat open. If folks would like to contribute there, I'll keep an eye as we go forward. And the slides will be available at the end of this presentation as well. Throw the link into the chat. A little bit about me. I have been an academic librarian since 2014, and I worked at Lake Washington Institute of Technology in Kirkland, Washington, just on the other side of the lake, Lake Washington from Seattle. And I was there from 2015 to 2023. So that is where I started exploring Gen AI. And I've continued to do so in my current role as faculty librarian at Spokane Community College, where I am about to celebrate my 1 year anniversary. I started at Spokane Community College in fall of 2023. My focuses have been on outreach, community programming, and technology. And if you don't know, I also enjoy being outdoors quite often, as this photo indicates. Outcomes for today, we'll explore some college libraries and librarianship in the context of Gen AI. We'll identify historic precedents for connecting library work to Gen AI. We'll ponder the examples of Gen AI work completed at Spokane Community College and determine possible ideas for action going forward at participants' libraries. This is designed for library workers, including librarians and other folks working in libraries. But if you're not working in a library, that's okay too, because if you're here, that probably means that you're at least interested and concerned with how libraries and librarianship interact with Gen AI. So welcome to all of you. Let's start with some introduction questions via Menti. So I'm going to break out of the PowerPoint and open up the Menti. If you're getting your phone out and scanning that QR code, it will be on the Menti itself too. So let's just take a moment to transition over to that. And go. Awesome. So our first question today is, how do you currently feel about Gen AI in higher ed? And again, let me open up the QR code. And you can also use the numeric code. If you've never used Mentimeter before, just go to menti.com and use code 51830132. Type that in the chat while we're waiting for responses. Alien. Tired. Okay. Overwhelmed. Nice. Good to hear that, even if it isn't great. It's ongoing quality, I would say. I like the word collage in this case. Suspicious. You've come to the right room. Overworked. Let's take another minute or so to keep adding, and you're welcome to add more than one term if you want. Okay. Opium. It's an interesting one. Floundering. You all are pretty poetic for 10 a.m. this morning. Dispirited. Okay. And I appreciate the mentioning of newbie. Everyone is welcome here, experienced folks and non-experienced folks alike. Keep going if you want. We'll keep moving forward here. Okay, our next question is, how does GenAI show up at your library or in your college role? And if it doesn't, that is fine too. Take a good minute or so to see answers for this question. I know we're moving fast, but again, we had a slight delay with starting. I want to make sure we get through most of the content. Having to teach the AI generated content they're trying to use, teaching English comp and lit, so it's everywhere. OER creation, interesting. Primarily in academic honesty, citation concerns thus far, student writing papers, mostly in student work, asking librarians to instruct on plagiarism prevention involving AI. We're just beginning to study how to respond and teach critical approaches to AI. And ethical student behavior. Thank you to all the English faculty for being here too, and instructors who are more aligned with the English world. That's fantastic that you're attending this. I love that. Students trying to convince me their AI work is really their own. Just philosophical implications with that. It's so far not helping much with my own workload. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for sharing, and it's nice to see the spread between the student end of things and our instruction, as well as our own workflows and our own uses of these technologies. Okay, and this one, what concerns do you have with Gen AI in higher education at this time? Do this again quite quickly, just a couple minutes. One word answers are also fine if it's feeling overwhelming today. Misuse, okay. Ethical use, academic integrity, cognitive offloading, as we saw in the keynote today, that was a huge focus. Laziness, shared agreements, yeah, and the social contract element that also came up in the keynote, but also just how we're all commonly talking about these things. Detection versus no detection, unpaid labor, loss of written voice, no concerns at the moment. Okay. Environmental impact, that's a huge thing that's coming up in the news a lot lately. Faculty think that everything is AI when it isn't, and false accusations. Okay. That's definitely a great perspective to include in this conversation. Flattening of content knowledge. lack of details, adequate support at college, FERPA. Okay, and privacy is a huge one too. Great. Let's move forward. Okay, cool. That's my placeholder. We'll move forward to future questions in a second. Let's go back to our PowerPoint here. Again, thank you for the participation. I appreciate that. With the question on concerns, let's move into some overview on those and additional concerns in higher ed. So yeah, the ethical issues are persisting. If you are experienced, you've seen a lot of these since day one of ChatGPT coming out and getting popular. But these impact teaching and learning as well as research. The research we're doing, the research our students are doing in our communities. We've got bias in data sets and the generated responses. Where there is bias in human knowledge, there will be bias in the data that these tools are trained on. Many of these tools don't provide citations, and those that do might not even provide real citations or real references to real concepts, i.e., hallucinations. Also, copyright and intellectual property concerns, and where the content that's being generated is derivative from. Critical thinking and comprehension. This came up just a moment ago. Where is the flattening? Where is the detail? Where is the understanding as we're leaning into generation of information rather than the handmade, old-fashioned kind? Institutional structures, investment, and commitment to support. Who's responsible for doing this work? Who's responsible for leading these conversations? Where is this stuff being formalized? And how is it not being formalized? And when we do have knowledge in institutions, especially if it's not formalized or not across the board, where are those knowledge silos? Teams, departments, divisions, and leadership, and the disparity and lack of cohesion or consistency across those silos. We've also got what came up in our word cloud, being overwhelmed. Learning about this technology is information overload. Using it arguably will lead to information overload. And for those of you that are not in the information science realm, there's a lot of research on information overload that's been spanning now decades. And how is that going to evolve that topic as we look at our access to information, be it good or not, through generative tools. And then also being on top of things as they change. As an individual that loves this stuff, I feel like it's almost impossible to be aware of all of the changes to all of the tools that I use all the time. So what does that mean? And responding to disruptions, how do we do that when they're quick and varied? Spoiler alert for folks that are new to higher ed, we do it poorly in higher ed quite often. So how might we think about our responses to these technological disruptions today? And so that is where we go with our presentation on librarianship and libraries. Enter the librarian. What I'm about to share is just my perspective, and it comes from years now of practice being involved and engaged with Gen AI. But I do find the role of the librarian as one that can help support responses to those concerns and more. First of all, the librarian has an alignment with historic skill sets, interests, and professional responsibilities when it comes to Gen AI. There is also a flexibility with connection making and applications of work. And I put that in air quotes because there's a much different type of flexibility when it comes to my librarianship within a community college setting and particular roles, especially in larger organizations. So not every librarian or library worker is going to be able to adapt their role to respond to Gen AI, but I am seeing it in my role at my college more possible than many other roles at the college. Faculty instructional librarians hold unique student-facing roles. So this is, again, from my experience at SCC, there's no other student-facing role that can do as much for as many students. Librarians are the go-to for critically engaging in technology. Now, certainly there are coaches, there are tutors, and so on, but our e-learning team, for example, is employee facing, specifically faculty facing. They're not going to engage with students. Otherwise, there's the faculty themselves that are bound to their program areas in many cases. the faculty librarians, we can help anybody. And so maybe we are the ones to support and serve Gen AI needs in our community. Community trust in librarians and librarianships, expectations of knowing. This does lead a little bit into problematic areas, like librarians are considered these super rock stars and often are taken advantage of in many cases. And there's the vocational awe aspect and how there's this kind of idealism behind librarianship. But at least in my experience, there has been a degree of trust, regardless of those issues, that may allow for that connection making to happen with to respond to the various needs in the community. We're also watchdogs regarding a lot of the problematic ways of finding, using, and creating information. So we love to look at the problems and ask questions about those problems. And with this type of disruptive technology that is incredibly problematic, maybe that's inherent in the way we do our jobs, that again, we are aligned with responding to Gen AI. Gen AI concepts can be integrated into instruction, reference programs, collection development, etc. So we're doing a lot of work that Gen AI could possibly impact or is impacting. And so maybe, again, that makes it a good lens through which to approach Gen AI within the college setting. And finally, this is a very open-ended one, but connections to and awareness of community needs and actions. This is, again, one of our priorities in the library is understanding what the community needs and where it's going. And Gen AI is here. It's impacting our community. So why not have the library be one of the stakeholders in Gen AI work? The librarians are one way to look at the work, but I want to recognize that the library is often just as important, if not more so. The library as a whole, as a space, as a service center, as well as a group of workers. And it's so important to recognize the issues of librarianship versus all the other brilliant people that work in libraries. And so I'm going to talk for a couple minutes about that too. Um, and yes, that is a lighthouse made out of books, and they decided to create the beams of light out of books as well, which I thought was pretty interesting. And by they, I mean Dolly. So yeah, the library is bigger than roles. So I think that offers a little bit of flexibility. We can see our librarian role, but we can also see that there's a variety of other roles within the library that share the same values and responsibilities and commitments as the librarians. Um, the library has historically been responsible for resource collections and subscriptions, access to technology, and again, student facing. So how students are using these things, which makes it a good fit for responding to Gen AI. Libraries are a safe space for academic and intellectual freedom, which means exploration. It means exploration of where information is coming from, as well as the technology that is being used to provide access to information. We recommend resources. We recommend starting points. We often describe certain things as being authoritative or not. And I realize also, faculty in general, instructors in general, and other stakeholders at the college may do the same thing, but this is our go-to. This is what we build into our websites and our LibGuides and our Canvas modules and how we support students within different classes that we're invited to support. So this is kind of our foundation. We are recommenders. We are gatekeepers is kind of a nasty term, but we are intermediaries when it comes to the information and technology at the college. And so we can help facilitate that perspective when it comes to Gen AI as well. We promote inclusivity and inclusive viewpoints towards technology, research, and information. We do recommend authority, but we also talk about bringing every voice to the table. And that could include looking at how the experimentation of Gen AI and where Gen AI is taking us culturally, where it's taking us technologically, how it's important to stay on top of those things, but not necessarily count them out or push them away or restrict our community from accessing them. We promote responsible and ethical use of technology. So we're already doing this with search engines, with research databases, with different types of resources we can easily extend into the work of Gen AI. Figurative alarms are sounded regularly. So we also like to express concern when it comes to technology. I mentioned this with the librarians as watchdogs, but this also is something that we're thinking about when it comes to the ethical platforms, the ethics around the platforms that are being used. What are the relationships between those platforms and capitalism and people with power, et cetera? So why not think about Gen AI in this way as well? Like other organizations, library work itself may benefit from using Gen AI. So even if we are thinking about using it or thinking about promoting it or talking about it within the library, we also may have the added benefit of using it in our workflow, which is important in learning the technology. So there's that nice connection as well. And for the library and English faculty and folks in the room, there's also a very easy connection through the information literacy framework. It is old now. It is almost a decade old, but it is still relevant and it is actively being used in many libraries across the US and beyond. And the different frames within the framework, which I'm not going to go into today because of time, but I think they can all be connected to Gen AI quite directly without any actual updating of the framework itself, just by nature of how open and flexible the framework is when it comes to the types of technology we're using and the ways technology and information is connected. And I think there could be a really great presentation on those connections. Perhaps that is something that will be forthcoming. So let's transition into what's happening at the SEC library. As I mentioned, I've been at the college since last fall, but we've done quite a lot. We are actively responding to employee and student needs and interests. That's kind of how we've approached this, taking all of those easy pathways and connections from the last few slides and thinking about what we can do. We are responding to needs and we are sharing information very widely, both internally within the school, but also, as is the case with this presentation and beyond, we're sharing information externally as well, supporting community and community needs and beyond. We've taken a multi-pronged approach to actions, so we don't have a like one way of doing things and thinking about things when it means responding and formalizing the work. And we do external collaboration whenever possible. So thinking about how we can collaborate with other faculty, with other departments at the college, with other folks at other institutions, and so on. We do proclaim knowledge authority while supporting others' growth and supporting the work. So I think it's a challenge to be the AI group or the AI authorities and proclaim expertise when so many folks are overwhelmed and when we often are, but we have represented that authority, at least locally at the college, so that more folks will come to us and have conversations with us. Specific actions at the library have included a public-facing GenAI LibGuide, which is linked, I believe, at the end of these slides. Video tutorials on popular tools, which have been released via YouTube and Canvas Commons. So if you use Canvas Commons, you can find a module from us there. You can, welcome to import that. Fellowship through Teaching and Learning Center. This is something that I did over the last 2 academic terms. And that was centered around workforce education and Gen AI. We have very specific workforce programs at SCC, and I wanted to really think about and talk with the folks there to learn how this might be an impactful conversation long term. Librarian-led student-centered workshops, which have happened on a variety of topics since I started. I've been running them every quarter. And the previous workshop topics have included introduction, ethics, impact on the visual world, ethical uses for productivity, creative projects, plugins, and GPTs. Forthcoming workshops will talk about specific LLMs. We'll talk about we'll have workshops based on tool categories, so text, computer code, video, image, all of the different categories you can think of. And of course, information literacy. That's one that I've been holding off on, but I think we're about ready to launch that. What else is happening at the SCC library? We've the library, and that includes faculty and others. We've had meetings and consultations with different departments, academic programs, and various faculty who have wanted to meet. We have provided instructional support and conference presentations in collaboration with our English as a second language department. If anyone is interested in that specifically, please reach out. I can share slides and summaries of those presentations. We've also had collaboration with our business technology program, creative writing program, and several health classes in terms of actually teaching Gen AI in those classes. We've done a lot of acquisitions of Gen AI books. Basically, any book that's been published on it, we've brought into our collection. Now, beyond the library, more is happening. We've seen e-learning, which has created a fantastic Gen AI micro course, which is in their Canvas course. And that's for employees who, when they take it, do get paid. So they get a stipend. So there is encouragement and incentive to participate in that course. We have regular quarterly faculty forums for all faculty, and there has been a presentation from e-learning and the library and a couple of other stakeholders, and that was in winter of this last academic year. There was an e-learning led community of practice, also a paid opportunity open to all faculty on creating Gen AI statements. That occurred last quarter. We have invested in paid ChatGPT accounts, the Plus accounts. Both the library and e-learning have those for the purpose of staying up to date with at least how ChatGPT is working. Librarian created student conduct module for misuse of Gen AI is forthcoming. I was invited by student services at SCC to create this module for students who do violate our academic integrity policy, and we're hoping to roll that out in fall. It's also a module that we're hoping to offer to faculty who want it embedded in their courses from the get-go. So not just responding to academic misuse, but also using it as a proactive tool. So some students will be able to go through it and learn a lot about Gen AI and ethical use and unethical issues or ethical issues of Gen AI when they're in certain classes. Let's go back to Menti now and ask ourselves, what is our library doing and what do we want to do? And again, not sure if the chat has that carried over. So I will repost the code and I'll show the QR again. And let's move to the next slide here. Yes, so this is a fun, just choose your own or choose my own adventure. I put in some pre-made answers for this question. And I'll just retype the code here. Looks like the QR code will get in the way of one of the responses, so I will remove that in a minute. And if none, that is, yeah, I meant to include a none on here. So if none, sorry, just hang tight. You're welcome to throw comments on none in the chat as well, if you want to be included that way. It's fine. And it looks like conversations are happening. And we've got trainings or workshops for employees. I'm seeing in the chat, nothing institutionally. Thank you, Jim, for that comment. And also, Kirsten, our e-learning is doing trainings and producing supporting materials for us. Okay. AI-assisted enhanced literature review and research platforms. Interesting. I feel like that could be a community of practice or a research committee or research team in itself. Okay. All right, I'm going to move on to the next question for time here. What Gen AI action do you want to explore? So, Greg, you already kind of threw this into the chat, but if you want to repost it, you can. And everyone else, you're invited to answer this question as well. Consider the actions and the things that we're doing at SCC as inspiration, perhaps, or maybe you have other ideas that you are thinking about when it comes to what you could do, what you could do at in your job, in your role, or maybe you can't do it in your job and role, but you still want to do it, or you want your college to do it. These are all super important things to consider and imagine. Adding elements to our academic honesty citation guides around GenAI. Love that. That's something that I might actually riff off that idea because that's something that we've been pondering on how to do. But having guides would be great. OER GenAI platforms trained on independent OER sources. I know that there's definitely been some talk on that with some of the issues and ethics around do the licenses, especially like Creative Commons licenses, like maybe it does fit in the use of the licenses, but maybe there should be additional license wording for how OER content can be used with GenAI. Student training, tutor training, love that. What do you want to explore? Using AI to create art? That is something you could try today, I'm sure. More access to paid platforms. Yes. Better training regarding what Turnitin says. Teaching and learning ethical and appropriate uses. That's, I think, going to be an ongoing thing for many of us. My college doesn't have workshops for students yet. Just drop me a line if you want to see some of my slides or recordings on my workshops as inspiration. Interested in AI being a part of info literacy rather than policing plagiarism. Awesome. Trends for use in healthcare. That's a huge field. And how the use applications are massive. Using AI to better assist my time spent in the office. Yes, personal workflow for sure. Partnership with student success, student life, ELAD to create and promote workshops. Love the partnership idea. And finally, what concerns do you have with library and librarian involvement with GenAI at this time? I'm just looking at the clock, so we're going to do this for just a couple minutes and move back to the slideshow. This will segue into slides that I prepared for this topic. Funding, yes, good one. And I like that it's in caps. We should shout that. Environmental concerns. Yep. Yeah, will we even be around long enough on this planet as we use more and more electronic technology to support this stuff? No concerns. Okay. Okay, so that is the end of the Menti. Again, thank you for contributing. All right, so my book monsters here. Let's take a look at some challenges in depth. I think one of the big ones is capacity with our roles, countering flexibility and availability. So yes, while many of us are assumed to be flexible and adaptive, I mentioned this earlier, not all of us are. So how do we build in capacity? Questions around burnout as well, and adding another thing onto a long list of things can be problematic. Interest levels vary. Levels and types of concerns from librarians and library workers vary. Um, Not to put any individual on the spot, but there has been a remarkable variation in my library regarding who is concerned and how concerned, and who's interested in even thinking and talking about it, and how we can have a unified line or belief in how we should talk about it within the community, if we should have a unified line or belief. Lack of structural support or recommendations from leadership. And that definitely ties into funding, but even just suggestions on how to move forward, encouragement, leadership around what we're doing. Minimal understanding of the lanes across the institution. I mentioned the library at SCC is very student facing in a very unique way. That doesn't mean that there aren't lanes. When e-learning is providing a lot of support to employees, does that mean that they're the ones that are supposed to be doing it above everyone else? Or should the library also support employees? And how much should they do so? Where are the lanes and what do they look like? more considerations needed for using technology in roles. So we have the opportunity to use this technology in our jobs. I think most of us can use ChatGPT as long as we want and as much as we want. But have we actually had those conversations yet? We're talking a lot about student use. Let's talk about our own use. Long-term visioning and sustaining connections to Gen AI. So we're only getting more overwhelmed and exhausted, especially with the openness and chaos and uncertainty. What's the long-term vision? What's our game plan? This is a major higher ed issue across the board, and it is also including Gen AI. When we think about long-term support, libraries should consider investing in Gen AI resources over time, but what does that look like? What are we going to look at over time? Which tools are we going to focus on? Are we going to pay for any? Are we going to think about specific tools with our students? How does that all look? More than just a flash in the pan, how does it look year over year, et cetera? Leadership should support librarian Gen AI PD opportunities and commitments to Gen AI work within the college. That's part of funding, of course. That's also just having leadership suggest that we think about the Gen AI PD that's out there. I think many of my colleagues might not have as much interest because they aren't getting access to all of the PD that's available or being encouraged or supported to attend some of those conferences or workshops or seminars or courses. Gen AI discussions should be consistent and expected, occurring regularly. Often they are haphazard and once in a while, every so often, maybe a special topic. But without the consistency, that sense of long term is often lost, I think. Collaboration from across the institution should consider library perspectives. I say this is a recommendation because the library, again, we have that watchdog approach. We have those ethical considerations in mind. So if there is work being done by leadership, by e-learning, et cetera, bringing in those library perspectives can support long-term support. Support. They can integrate long-term support through the library's long-term concerns within the institution. Okay, so that is the end of my presentation. I did go through that quite quickly, and again, that was because we started a little bit late, but I thank you. The slides are available on this slide, and they will be put into the chat. That QR code is this link. It should be an open link. And you can use those slides, reference them, etc. Few additional things within the slides. We've got recommended professional development opportunities, which I'm not going to go over in depth right now. Some recent Gen AI readings, and some InfoLit-based Gen AI readings as well for the folks that are concerned with InfoLit. These have mostly been published within the last 6 months. There are a couple that are slightly older, but there's a lot of research and a lot of critical writing that's being published across academic sources and beyond. So it's a good time to be alive and doing this work. In the chat, we have a practice framework we can bring to the conversations too with our information literacy framework. Yes, great, Katie. If anyone has any questions, got maybe a minute or two. This technically ends at 10:45, but I can answer. Thank you, Greg. The question from Greg is, what should us English instructors do about AI? I would personally recommend, and I've seen this done within SEC, have conversations with librarians. This is a library presentation, so that's the first thing I'm going to recommend. But if this wasn't a library-based presentation, I would probably put before that, have conversations with your department. And that might already be happening, but having that consistent approach whenever possible, I think is important. The conversations I've had have been very stressful. The ones I've seen and heard about within English at SEC have been very stressful because there's so many issues around plagiarism and grading and tweaking assignments and that sort of stuff. And rather than ongoing more involved conversations, that it's a lot of stressful reactionary conversations, and it's the conversations haven't led to many deeper dives. So definitely have more conversations if you can within your department. I'd also consider thinking about how you communicate with students, building in statements for your course within your syllabus, as well as statements on a more granular level when it comes to what you personally allow or do not allow when it comes to assignments or activities. And writing in general. And then also thinking about if you do allow it, how you allow it, and how you want the students to talk about it. What's the bare minimum that students should do if they use it? And that could include a single statement, like a pre-made statement that you have, or perhaps you require them to write a paragraph on how they've used it. We know that a lot of the detectors do not work well. We know that there are a lot of problems with automating detection and vetting of content to see if it's generated or partially generated. And there are a lot of because there are a lot of issues with those tools, there's a lot of issues on our own workflow as faculty. So I would not lean into those detector tools at this time, but having conversations around usage and statements of usage and communicating with students, with the relationships you have with students, can go a long way. Jim, one of the things I'm considering is having students submit their discussion thread when using Chat GPT. Right? Yeah, you can definitely share out the conversations now, which promotes transparency. What are your opinions about citing AI? I've concluded that citing AI is actually citing plagiarism. Again, if you're not going to personally recommend AI or allow it, then you probably would have that belief. If you think that all of the generated material, or if it's partially generated, is problematic and not indicative enough of uh, individually created material, if that is your perspective, which is fine, then don't don't ask them to use a citation tool because you're not approving of that technology. I do think that the way MLA and APA have thought about citing is good for those folks that approve of using it. Yes, there are APA and MLA citation guidelines. That is the end of this presentation. I do thank you very much for being here and participating. Please reach out if you have any questions. Use the slides to get my email, or it's just greg.bem at sec.spokane with an E .edu. And best of luck to you as we go forward into the new academic year. Have a
Greg,
great day.
thank you so much. That was a wonderful presentation. We really appreciate it. And thank you for your participation in this institute. I just wanted to say very quickly, we've updated the URLs for the Zoom rooms for the tracks. So I've posted that in the chat. It's updated in Whova and updated on our website. Our apologies to Greg for having to start late due to this snafu, but we've learned some very valuable lessons about technology through it. So we appreciate it.
Thanks,
Okay,
Jeff.
I'm going to go ahead
Have a
and
good day,
stop the
everybody.
recording.